Hey guys, how's it going? Here with another episode of Average Joe's MMA Podcast. You're here with Tyler and my co-host Sesko. Sesko, how's Georgia looking today? How you been doing?
It's looking rainy. It's looking nice. It's getting a little cold. It's going to be raining all weekend, so it'll be a perfect night to get by the TV and watch some amazing cage fighting.
Yeah, at least it's not on fire like a lot of the country at the moment.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. I'll take rain over fire any day, right?
There you go. Yeah, and like you said, we're going to have an amazing card this weekend. UFC 253 headlined by Israel Adesanya and Paulo Costa. Like, what a neck-and-neck close fight. There's a lot to pick apart here, but ultimately, in my opinion, it's going to be down to the wire. I don't think anyone really knows who's going to be winning this fight. And beyond that fight, we were just talking about this, but even the prelim card seems to have a lot of good fighters, a lot of fighters that have many wins and not very many losses. So altogether, it seems like it's going to be a great night of UFC. September's been a great month of UFC, and I can't wait for the final fight between Adesanya and Costa.
Right. This is a very interesting stage right now because remember we're at Fight Island again now. These fights are happening in Abu Dhabi. Right. Is that where it is? Yeah, Abu Dhabi in the Emirates. And so I think Dana White takes these opportunities to bring really good fighters over to those islands. Like remember Fight Islands where Hamzat got his legendary two fights in 10 days start. So I think we should expect a lot out of these people on every part of the card, including the prelims on Fight Island. Dana White's not going to fly people to Dubai to Abu Dhabi and not, have high expectations of them.
Definitely. And for those listening, just so you know, we're going to be attempting again to co-stream, do a fight companion this weekend for the main card, possibly part of the prelims, maybe for the Diego Sanchez fight, but definitely for the main card. So just YouTube, Average Joe's MMA Podcast will pop up. We'll be doing a live stream. Join us. We'll have a good conversation, have a good time watching the fights. But with that, let's just dive into the card. So on the prelims, like we said, there are many fighters that have a lot of wins, not many losses. We're not going to be going through all of them today. We don't really have time for that. But the biggest name on the prelim card is, of course, Diego Sanchez, our favorite, the guy who's working with a mystic or something, chasing him around with swords in the cage to train him. Diego Sanchez is all over the place, but the dude's incredibly entertaining to watch. And I'm really excited to see him go up against Jake Matthews.
Yeah, Diego Sanchez, I believe, is the first winner of the Ultimate Fighter. He's had a very long and pretty storied career with the UFC. He's gotten, like you said, into some weird mysticism. He's being trained by a weird self-help guru type guy. There's all sorts of shenanigan, or it just looks like misbehavior. It seems like from Diego and his coach. His coach during one of his last fights, he was telling somebody on the UFC, hey, I taught Diego a super special move. It's going to kill the person in there that he's going to use. Or he was sticking Q-tips with peppermint oil up Diego's nose, like a horse stimulant looking thing or something. They were doing all sorts of weird shenaniganry. And I personally hope to see more of it. I think Diego Sanchez is unfortunately probably pretty far down the back half of his career at this point. He's pretty old. He's not shown very good performances in the last few fights. I think his only chance at staying relevant, and probably the only reason he's on the Fight Island card at all, is because of the shenaniganry and the attention that he brings doing this kind of strange stuff. It's my personal opinion.
It's true, but we can't forget. So he lost to Michael Chiesa, but then he beat Mickey Gall, and then technically he beat Michel Pereira. So it's technically he's doing fine. He won his last fight, if you don't know, by a DQ to the knee to the head in the last 2 minutes of the fight, and he was getting demolished. But what's really interesting is he'll go for those entertaining stuff. He'll never let up on it. And to be honest, I love seeing him out there. I don't really care about his skill level. I don't see him as a top 15 fighter. But in his Instagram story, he did say he has a path to fighting Conor McGregor because he plans to win his next 3 fights in excellent fashion. Can't wait to see that. I actually believe a lot of the weird antics kind of started around his divorce, which is very unfortunate. It's taken him on a weird road in life. But I also feel that that road has given him more publicity, more popularity. He's always been a well-known name. He's been around since The Ultimate Fighter 1. People love him. They've known he's crazy, but people love that about him. So as long as he's bringing fans in, I think he's going to continue to fight. The problem with this fight specifically is Jake Matthews is only 26. So you could argue Diego Sanchez simply has more experience and will win on that front. But Jake Matthews being 16-4 at just 26, I feel like physically he's going to have a big advantage. I'm not sure Diego Sanchez is going to be able to hold out and win that fight.
Yeah, so Jake Matthews has a pretty nice record. He won his only fight so far in 2020 against Emil Meek. He won one fight against Rostem Akman in 2019. He's on a 4-fight win streak at this point. He's got a lot of momentum going into the fights. Like you said, he's super young, and like I know experience does like speak a lot, but it's worth mentioning that like 20 fights is still like a substantial. I think like once you get a certain threshold, like 15, 20 fights, like the experience gap like really gets kind of minimalized. Like it's like a diminishing return kind
There's
of
a
thing on
sweet
experience.
spot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like having 50 fights, like, yeah, you know a lot, but like, the guy who knows 20 fights might just have like a similar fight IQ as you at that point, I feel like.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that's true. And I also think you speak to diminishing returns because physically, no matter how much you know something or know how to do something, if you can't physically do it against another guy that it's probably pretty competitive, probably wants to get the title, is going to try to beat your ass, it's going to be really tough. So we'll see what happens there. But after that, the rest of the prelim card, like we had mentioned, it seems to be really good. So I would personally advise you guys to be tuning in for the prelims as well. I think there are going to be some great fights on there. And every so often, you see actually the best fights on the prelim card. I think this card could be one of those, so definitely check it out. But moving into the main card, the first fight is Hakeem Dawodu, hell of a name, boy, and Zubaira Tuagov. I believe that's how it's pronounced.
Takugov.
Takugov is Chechnyan dude. So, I mean, those guys are all really, really tough. Hakeem, let me see what I have here. Hakeem had beaten Murat Magomedov, who's actually a rising star. He's being coached by the guy that coached Ronda Rousey. So he first had a draw with him and then ended up beating him. He currently has an 11-1 record. And, I think simply having the win over Murat is huge. I think that shows he's a pretty excellent fighter. So although I don't know a ton about him, I will say that's a fight I'm really, really interested in. And I expect Hakeem to do very well in it, even though he's going against a very, very tough opponent, a 19-4 Zubaira, who, like all the other Russian, Chechnyan, Dagestani people, is probably just a beast that's trying to rip someone's head off.
Yeah, it's a very interesting matchup against two well-seasoned fighters. Zubaira seems to have more fights, but they fight a lot in Russia, I've noticed. So I heard Habib had like hundreds of amateur fights when he was young and stuff. So I think it's pretty common for these guys to get kind of like a jump start on their career kind of younger, which is why they come into the UFC with higher numbers generally. But Hakeem Dawodu he is streaking right now. He's beating like really high-class talent. He's won his last 4 fights. He seems to get a lot of decisions, so he fights like technically. I imagine he takes it to the end. While Zubaira has had in his last 3 fights a win, a draw, and a loss. So kind of mixed results recently for him. So your past fights don't necessarily define how you're going to perform, but it shows the kind of form you're in. Guys that are streaking generally seem to be getting better and better and better. Like when you watch that. So yeah, I think it's gonna be an interesting matchup stylistically. I think it's gonna be a nice, violent fight. Featherweight's
so it's going to be a featherweight fight. Hakeem, I actually did see earlier on in his career, he did have more knockouts, and it wouldn't be one punch knockout power. He would just overwhelm people and they would just collapse. So there's definitely a possibility that happens, but I would say this probably is going to go to a decision if I had to bet on it.
I mean, yeah, generally you see that in the lighter weight classes. The guys just don't have that. A lot of them don't have that threshold of power that it takes to really put people away.
Mm-hmm. But then you have guys that do. Do you know who the current featherweight champion is? I believe he has some crazy power. Let me just look this up quick. Joseph Benavidez. I mean, Davison Figueiredo. That dude, the guy with the colored hair. Oh my God, he's got some crazy power for a 125er. So I think it does exist in the division. It's just it's much harder to find than you would in higher weight classes. But regardless, it's going to be an awesome fight. Are you ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to Ketlin Vieira versus Sajira Eubanks. So let's see. Sajira is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, while Ketlin is also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So we could see a very interesting grappling matchup between the two women here.
Yeah, so Sajira, she's actually a fill-in, I believe. I believe she was a last-minute replacement. She's currently 7-4, and Ketlin Vieira is 10-1, although she got knocked out pretty badly in her last fight. That was, I believe, around a year ago. So in this matchup, Kedlin's last fight, it was a complete stand-up game. Even though she was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert, she wanted to keep it stand-up. I don't know if that was opponent specific, but after having gotten knocked out, I really doubt that she's going to try to keep it standing the whole time. I think she's going to try to get that advantage on the ground.
Yeah, so I want to point out that before her loss, she went undefeated up until that point, and then he even defeated Kat Zingano, who's an extremely big name in the sport of the UFC, who's fighting in Bellator right now.
And that was her last fight before getting KO'd. So I mean, she's definitely still up there. Every once in a while, you get KO'd, man. That's just part of the sport. Almost everyone does. So let's see if she mentally can come back from that. Because some fighters, maybe they struggle with after getting KO'd, really just getting back to form. Maybe their mental is just off. So I think it'd be very telling for the rest of her career, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I personally hope that she takes the excellent form that she had through 10 fights very clearly and continues to build upon that even in like a more, focused way after the knockout. Because her record and her career is still something very special, it seems like, or it has the potential to end up being very special, right?
I will say, I watched her last fight, and it was mostly stand-up. Her stand-up's not incredibly technical. It seems a little bit wild. She seems very tough and built like a tank, but she seems kind of wild, not super technical. So I personally would like to see her bring it to the ground to take that one home. Then going on to the third fight of the main card. This guy's an awesome name. Kai Kara-France. Like, that's freaking awesome. And then Brandon Royval. Kai Kara-France, let me see. He's definitely got knockout power. I've seen him in several highlights. He has a lot of boxing experience. So expect this guy to he's probably going to maintain the stand-up if he can, preferably throughout the fight. And he has a few head kick KOs. So he's very explosive on the feet. His right hand is incredibly powerful. And he's going up against someone, Brandon Royval, who's more of a submission grappling guy. He still has power to get KOs, but for the majority, he's going for the submission. So this is the classic striker versus submission artist grappler, in my opinion.
Yeah, so Kai Kara-France is from France, as it would say, as
I would hope
suggests.
so. From England, like.
So yeah, the French are the French people culturally seem to take up striking arts very well, like most Western Europeans. So I think his kickboxing is going to be very sharp and very on point. I'm interested to see why he brought his skill set to the UFC. You know what I mean? Like if he's a kickboxer, I imagine he has good accomplishments in that. I hope that it's going to end up being a grappler versus striker in some capacity. Though most grapplers you see, they're willing to stand up with people a lot of the time. They
and he is.
Yeah. So you never know. I imagine if it's I feel like a grappler can always beat a striker if paced correctly. In some ways, if he can get him down when they're tired, like the striker just won't be able to stand up.
If you can get in on him and you get a takedown, sure. But if you're like Israel Adesanya, it's like, how do you even start that by getting the takedown? It's just so difficult to even get the takedown. I don't know to be honest, what Kai's takedown defense is like. That's obviously going to be a huge factor in this fight. You mentioned you're not really sure why he went to the UFC after being in a kickbox or whatever. I just think it's got to be money. It's got to be fame. Like, I feel like if you're an elite combat athlete, you eventually make your way to the UFC, regardless of which discipline you started in. It just shows that you're a fully all-around combat athlete. And I think most individual disciplines one day, if you're able to, you would want to end up at the UFC, maybe in MMA. But that's just my opinion.
Sure. And, I know the pure mixed martial artists had their time to do very well, around the Anderson Silva era and stuff. But it's interesting to see pure artists coming back into the sport at more extreme levels, like Francis Ngannou being a great example of that. You know what I mean?
Even Adesanya.
Yeah, certainly. So it seems like the level of competition, despite of style, just keeps getting elevated, and I love seeing that get brought to the sport.
You're right. We went. For a while, it went back to you have to be a completely well-rounded mixed martial artist. And you certainly do, but then you have Khabib's coming around. You got Israel Adesanya's coming around, where they're so good at one, you just can't stop their A game. And when you can't kick them off their A game, you're just going to end up losing. So, yeah, I hope to see something great out of Kai Kara-France. I think it's going to be a good fight, but that leads us into our next two fights, which both are title fights, and these both are going to be freaking amazing events. Dominic Reyes coming off a loss to John Jones that everyone I talked to has said he won the fight. And I've rewatched the fight, and it looked like he won the fight. I'm very surprised to see three judges go with John Jones, but Regardless, he's facing Jan Blachowicz, who the Polish whatever I don't know what you're gonna call him, but the dude is a tank. He's gonna knock you out likely. So, what are your thoughts?
This is the fight that to have both Israel Adesanya and Paulo Costa fighting on this card, it seems like we're getting too much almost,
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited for it. I think Dominic Reyes, like you said, like even though he lost in a decision, like assuming he won that fight, like just informed that like he did, he's 13 fights in a row. He's shown extreme like talent and capability against like the top of the division. Jan Blachowicz comes in with a more experience and like I'll be honest, I think deadlier striking. He seems to be he puts people to sleep off his back foot a lot. He choked a guy standing up. He did like a standing rear naked choke. So he's got a lot of like dynamic. He has high danger in his hands with dynamic options with the grappling game and against the cage. I think it might be Dominic Reyes' hardest challenge up in this point. I think Jan Blachowicz would have been a great challenger for John Jones even in the way he's fighting right now.
I wonder how Dominic Reyes approaches this fight, because in the John Jones, he was constantly circling, using his footwork to get away. How do you think he approaches Jan? I'm guessing he doesn't want to get in too close, right?
I mean, I would think so. I think Dominic Reyes' biggest weapon against a lot of his opponents seems to be like just raw athleticism, which includes things like that movement, that pace, like circling opponents. Like, maybe he can just physically dominate Jan Blachowicz that way, with
what's
pace,
interesting
like
is
Colby Covington style.
Dominic doesn't have great reach, but he was able to handle John Jones really well. So that doesn't seem to be a huge detriment to him. I thought it was interesting. He's a bit of T-Rex arm syndrome, you know what I mean? For a super tall guy, his reach is just isn't that big. But against Jan, I don't think it matters at all. In my opinion, Jan's going to try to keep the fight close. He might even grapple him. He might even just try to tire him out. But ultimately, in my opinion, I think Dominic Reyes, I'll give him the edge, 55 to like 45%. But for me, the average Joe's seal of approval for this fight would go to Jan, just because he's been streaking. I saw him as such an underdog before. I really didn't think he was that good. And then he kept knocking out huge names. And I'm like, what's going on here? This dude's the real deal. Right. So for me, for the average Joe seal of approval, I would love to see Jan make a statement, even though Dominic Reyes is an amazing fighter. And I really like the guy personally, too. So nothing against him. I just want to see Jan do well.
I share your sentiment exactly. I think like my logical like betting mind would go with Dominic Reyes. Like a 13 fight streak is like very, discounting the weird loss, like 13 fight streak is still very special. And it's going to take something very special out of Jan to beat that, I believe. Mm-hmm. But my seal of approval goes to Jan because he has some like weird good luck ritual where he like touches like a person who went into the woods and hanged themselves in Poland. There's like a special forest where they do it, and he went and touched the ropes for good luck apparently because his mother told him that. And I mean, like, who am I to say that Polish hang rope voodoo isn't going to win the fight for him?
Honestly, I feel like I'm going to get cursed if I bet against him. So I go with the Polish Death Forest guy. He also, it's like his personality-wise, he's not like the McGregor. He's not Adesanya. He's not an outgoing personality. He's not even he's likable, but he's not super charismatic. So it's very funny for me to see him being such an outstanding fighter, and then he tries to call people out. It just makes no sense. But regardless, I love the dude. I think he's a great fighter. 26-8. How old is he? He's 37 years old. Probably doesn't have too many more shots to get the title. So I think this is probably his big, big chance to make an impact, be a champion in the UFC, prove his worth in a division that I won't say is the top division in the UFC, but historically it's one of the most remembered divisions. I feel like 205 is one of those divisions you always remember fights from. So those are our opinions on the fight. Do you have any closing thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, just to agree with you. I think Jan Blachowicz is peaking in his career right now, personally.
Yep.
And I mean, if he can win here, the idea is just to keep sustaining at this point, right? This is the best he's ever done. This is the highest chance he's ever gotten. If he does win, I hope him great success because I feel like a 37-year-old worked very hard in a lot of fights to get there. So good on him, right?
What's interesting is I feel like if Dominic Reyes loses, he might get a rematch. But if Jan loses, I don't really know if he's going to get a rematch. That's how I feel from the UFC's promoting perspective.
I mean, who else will be the
exactly? The division's just not that. With John Jones leaving, it just there's kind of a mark on the division. And not to take away from these guys, I think they're going to do great. Like I said, Dominic Reyes probably beat John Jones, but you lost the guy that had the title for a decade and no one officially took it off.
Right. So, I mean, let's theorize what the other side of the career for these guys could look like, right? So the other big matchup in the division is Glover Teixeira versus Thiago Santos. So Thiago Santos, an absolute mauler in the division, streaked his way to the top. Glover Teixeira, an old name, but I mean, like deadly hands. Like he put a sad beating on Anthony Smith. That was
My
tough to
God.
watch.
He changed
So
his career probably. I mean, that dude's just not looking great.
right. So I think the winner is going to face the winner of those two as the champion. Logically, I think the loser might face the loser. Or there's always like the Serbian, that big old freak Alexander Rakic,
Oh my
who most
God.
recently fought. So I feel like he'd be an interesting matchup in there too to start mixing it up. So I feel like while the light heavyweight division is on a lull, like they will build up that talent again. It's like a sweet spot. That's where Johnny Walker is. That's where Corey Anderson was for a good long time. It's where like power meets elegance in like the highest level, I think.
I forgot about Rakic, but that dude could be a champion totally. So whatever I said, I kind of take back because like that dude is also a huge contender. Thiago Santos, huge contender. So the top of the division is doing great. I'll say the talent falls off a little bit. I don't think Johnny Walker's as good as many people said he was. The hype train didn't really live up to it, in my opinion. But still, I think it's worthy. I think this is going to be a great fight, and I'm excited to see who wins.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's gonna shape up what the future of the light heavyweight division looks like, and I really like watching the light heavyweights fight. So I'm really interested in who wins this.
And now for the two undefeated fighters, Paulo Costa and Israel Adesanya. Respectively, Israel Adesanya is 19-0, Paulo Costa 13-0. But they're both unbroken, at least professionally. I know Paulo Costa did lose in the Ultimate Fighter something. I know he did lose the finals, but since then he's been on a roll. He's worked incredibly hard. He's not the most technical person in the world. We all know that, but he's so strong. He's so durable. He just breaks his opponents. They crumble under him. The big question of this whole fight is Israel Adesanya going to be able to knock down or knock out Paulo Costa? Is he going to knock down his power? Is Paulo Costa going to be able to fight for 5 rounds? We have no idea. We know Israel can. So I'd probably give Israel the advantage if they end up going 5 rounds. And we don't know if Paulo Costa is going to be able to get in without getting jabbed to death. Because I had seen fights with Paulo Costa against multiple people where they just stick jabs out there. And he eats them like fucking dinner. Like he doesn't give a shit. But like against Israel Adesanya, who's keeping that range really well, it's going to be difficult to get around. Then again, Paulo Costa's Israel Adesanya's feints aren't going to be nearly as effective when Paulo Costa doesn't give a fuck. He's like, oh, you're feinting? I'm just going to punch you in the face. Like, you know what I mean? He's not able to really set up what he wants to get across. This is a tough one. What are your thoughts?
I mean, so just to start with this, the odd makers have Paulo Costa as the favorite in this.
That to me is incredible because my intuitive betting mind would go, all right, Israel Adesanya, maybe even 60-40. Based off his technical striking, he's able to take out Robert Whittaker, who's likely a better striker than Paulo Costa.
So, like, the only reason I bring up the odds is because, like, I feel like the odds makers have good use of good information and data and a lot of, like, past experience of, like, with what happens in the sport generally. So, like, what they think, maybe they know they're thinking of it from some angle that other people aren't. Maybe historically, like, this level of raw athleticism beats technicians. Who knows? I am super excited for it. The meme war between these two gentlemen has been hilarious. It's been amazing. They're just screaming at each other on like ESPN when they have them live streaming back and forth.
But then they saw each other in the hallway and they're like, "Hey, what's up, man? How you doing? You look good." Like just random, like it's kind of stupid, but
I mean, I'm kind of glad to see it though. Like as much hype as it brings, like I don't like thinking that these guys don't genuinely like each other because it takes away the pureness of the sport to me in a little bit.
But I don't think they actually do genuinely like each other. I just think they're cordial, which is what you do in life. Like if I see a person, I'm gonna go fuck you. You know what I mean? Maybe you're trying to promote a fight, but otherwise, why waste your energy?
Yeah, no, exactly that. At least cordial, at least common sense and manners. You know what I mean? They're not like no one's behaving like Colby or like anyone who's faced Colby. But I mean, that's a whole other.
Hey, as much as Colby's done wrong, he hasn't punched an old dude in the face or showed his genitals to some married woman like Conor McGregor, So as much antics as he does, he's not doing like illegal stuff. He's not like so.
And I really like Paulo Costa's management. He's in the same kind of like crew as Henry Cejudo. And Henry Cejudo, who by the way trains extremely extraordinarily like well to like get his physique and his body correct. he does like breathing exercises while he trains, so he can like he never gets like I think his coach said if you punch him in the stomach, he can like push out like the diaphragm, like kind of like paralysis, so he can stop himself from getting winded. Henry Cejudo is a freak physically from all the
Well, he's
training
born
he
and
does.
bred to be a fighter. I mean, he was at the Olympic fighting place for his Olympic career until he was 21, and I'm sure he's only been at like the top-notch training centers since with the top techno. He's like, do you know in Rocky when they had the Russian dude hooked up to the machines and whatever? That's what I imagine Henry Cejudo is in America. Like they just did everything possible to make him the top athlete, and they were able to do it, and it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Also, worth mentioning, Henry Cejudo had a fun little stint on American Ninja Warrior. Not American Ninja Warrior, Japanese Ninja Warrior, rather, like where he fell in the pit early on. But yeah, like I feel like, I don't know how long Paulo Costa has been training with these people that train Henry Cejudo, but if it's been long enough, I feel like because his like biggest edge is his like physical ability, they can refine that physical ability to like a freakish degree. Like
I don't know. I don't know if they're training in the same place because I believe they're training in Brazil. And I would guess they have more Brazilian fighters, and I would guess Henry Cejudo didn't train there. But if it's the same kind of camp, yeah, I totally agree. Like they definitely know what they're doing over there, and I think they know what their challenge is. An issue I see is Paulo Costa doesn't really have a defense other than put his hands up and wait, and that's kind of what like a Yoel Romero did, or like a Robbie Lawler. They would kind of sit against the cage and just try to eat shots and just wait for it to be over. He's been very successful in doing that, but is that the ideal way to do it against the striker like Adesanya? He's going to hit you from so many angles. You're not going to be able to defend everything by just putting your hands up. Also, the Kevin Gastelum fight, the reason Kevin Gastelum was able to get in is because he had amazing footwork and head movement. And I don't see any head movement from Paulo Costa, which goes back to the jabbing. He's just going to get picked apart through jabs. So I wonder in their training camp what their strategy was to get around it other than I'm going to go in and smash you. I understand Israel Adesanya, his frame's tiny. Like his belly area is just not that big. Maybe he can't take too many shots, but he has historically taken shots, and he also has a really freaking good chin as of now. So I'm curious to see what their strategy is going to be and whether or not they turn up the gas early like Costa's done for pretty much every other fight he's had.
Yeah, I think like it's worth mentioning and remembering that like while these like two guys are extraordinary gentlemen and a crazy athlete fighters and whatever, they're both managed by extremely talented people. They're coaches and they're like the people who like feed them and take care of their bodies and their physical training and stuff. Like the people who are training Paulo Costa are looking at Israel Adesanya. They're trying to find a way to crack that code. You know what I mean? Like, while Israel might have like more of a brain for it seems like a martial arts computer that he uses when he fights to pick people apart. I feel like people, sometimes offload that work to a coach to help let them tell you how to get into the opponent correctly.
And Costa seems that kind of guy, you know what I mean? He seems like the guy that would do that more so than even Adesanya, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I think he strikes me as the kind of guy who's like a very like yes coach kind of guy. Like go forward, do the thing, do it until you can't do it anymore, right? Yeah. Until you get told to do another thing. So, I mean, I really don't know who's gonna win. I can't do a pick. I can't do a seal of approval. I love both of these guys. It makes me sad that either of them have to lose their, let's end it in a draw. You know what I mean? Like a mutual knockout. You know what I mean? Like the ending of a dramatic
That would be
show.
amazing. Just a double KO.
Yeah, like Israel head kicks him while Polo punches him, and it just both go down.
For me, it's just there's so many factors to account for. Like Israel Adesanya, to dodge a lot of punches, especially against like Whitaker, for instance, Yoel, he would lean back. So what happens when he tries to lean back and Costa has him against the cage and there's nowhere to lean to? What if he just gets caught there? I really have no idea. On the other hand, like I said before, who knows if Costa's even going to be able to get in on the inside. And when he does do his bursts, Adesanya's amazing at cutting an angle and getting out really, really quick because he's so long. He can take giant steps and get away. And Costa doesn't run after you. He walks after you. So there's just so many different factors to account for, which makes this fight incredibly difficult to predict. Both fighters, incredibly entertaining. Love to see Paulo Costa. Love to see Adesanya, especially when Adesanya is throwing out new stuff, like crazy stuff. It seems like from the interviews, he wants to go back to being an exciting fighter. After the ULF fight, which I thought he lost, he basically was like, I'm disappointed in that. I don't want that to be my legacy, even if I did win. So I think he's going to come out, bring out some really interesting, fun stuff. I think he's going to be incredibly entertaining. And Costa's always entertaining. There's no Costa fight that's not entertaining because he's not going to back down. As far as winning, although I logically, I think Adesanya has the advantage. I'm going to go with Paulo Costa. I think that Israel Adesanya, I think he's going to break at some point. I don't think he can withstand it. Maybe that's illogical because Adesanya's faced big strikers before, and I get that. But Costa's a different beast. He's basically a 205er. That's just how I see him. So I'm going to give the edge to Costa, and I'm going to give him the average Joe seal of approval on my end. I want to see him win.
I think. I mean, have you seen their striking statistics? Like they have really interesting striking statistics. Actually, do you know Paulo Costa lands at a higher percentage than Israel Adesanya?
That's insane to me because it looks like he whiffs way more.
So like I think what it is like his sheer volume is within blitzes. So like once he closes the distance, he fires off a bunch at once. That like most of them hit. I feel like.
Mm-hmm. But he's also he's very susceptible to getting hit in those crossfires, and that's how Whitaker got knocked out. Like, does his chin hold up like it has? I feel like it. I don't think Adesanya can knock him out. I don't think so. But crazier things have happened.
I mean, here's one way to think of it. Like we say, like Israel Adesanya knocked out Robert Whitaker. Do you think Polo could knock out Robert Whitaker as well? Like how would Robert Whitaker do against Polo? I think Polo would smash him, honestly. Just in the form that he's been in recently, or at least against like Israel Adesanya. I think
what's interesting is if he faced him before the UL fights, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I think the UL fights, they just like with many fighters, one or two huge fights just take everything out of you, like most of what you had. But even saying that, Robert Whitaker's come back, got a win over Darren Till, so he's not like out of the mix completely. It's just his chin is not as good as it used to be,
Right. So yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to see it. I hope.
Who you're predicting, and who do you give the average Joe seal of approval to?
I'm gonna give both to Paulo. I think he's gonna take it. He seems too big for me. Like if he makes this like whatever weight cut he's having to make to be as large as he can over Israel, I don't know. Like. I don't know what Israel has in his tool belt to keep him safe perfectly for long enough. It's not going to take many hits, I don't think. Like I think one clean hit compromises Israel enough for the rest of the fight for Paulo to like capitalize and like close the gap.
Yeah, we're going to see where technicality meets raw strength and athleticism. It's just going to be a beautiful thing to watch. But they're both undefeated. Like, as much as we talk about all these things, they haven't shown so many of the weaknesses we've discussed, so we don't actually know. But that's what makes it so exciting. Everyone, you got to tune into this card. What else can we say?
I think Paulo Costa has more. Like I don't know if Israel Adesanya or him have more stamina per se, but I don't think the gap is nearly as wide as people think. Like from what you hear about Paulo Costa, he trains like 6 hours a day. Like physically, like it's not just muscle and size and bulk and strength. Like I think he's very, very like well tuned for fighting for a long time.
Well, he's never been in a 5-round fight. That's another big thing where we're like, we have to make an assumption because we have no idea. I think he will too, because if he's able to survive 3 rounds with UL, basically going full blast the whole time.
Yeah, 3 hard rounds.
I mean, to me, that says, you could probably last another 2 rounds if you're not going that hard. And I personally believe he's going to be slightly more patient than he has been. But once he gets on the inside, he's going to be just as aggressive as he's ever been.
Yeah, I think that's what like the slight downfall of Israel's fighting style is the pace of it. That like opponents that might otherwise gas themselves can like pace themselves better like while you do your slow dance of fighting, An
interesting point. I was watching Adesanya, and what he does is he sets the pace of the fight at the beginning. He doesn't even throw a strike for the first minute. All he's doing is throwing fakes and using footwork to like maneuver around the ring. He's not throwing strikes. He's just reading you. But does Costa let him read anything? That's the thing. I don't think Costa allows him to get away with that.
I mean, also like keep in mind, like how much is there to read? You know what I mean? Like there's an answer of how much information you can get. And then there's the other question of can you like act on that information? Like if you can read Paulo Costa's like, body movement, can you stop the shots? Can you block the hits? Can you take the damage still?
Yeah, and that's where it goes back to technical skill versus physicality. And people like to say, oh, if you're more technically skilled, you're going to win. But that's not always the case. That's not how sports like this work. The bigger dude, the stronger dude, who is good enough technically to not, like, let's say, get submitted easily like in the early UFCs, he's a beast. Like, you really got to watch out for that guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like potential for fight of the year, I think it's going to be super entertaining.
If I had to bet on a fight of the year, this would be it.
Yeah, like the hype leading up to it, like all the fights like that went up to this, like with Robert Whitaker and Kelvin Gastelum and like Paulo Costa fighting Yoel Romero and beating each other to a pulp. I think it's a perfect climax for a lot of like tension that's been building in this division.
And we could just have Romero fight the winner.
I mean, sure, if he wants, right? I mean, he doesn't have too many left. His body's got to be like falling apart at this
Well,
point.
I personally think he beat both Costa and Adesanya.
I
think he beat both, and the dude's like 43, and he's just a tank. Like, I love that guy. I'd love to see that guy.
No,
as much as I love to watch this fight, like, Yoel is my favorite.
Yoel, did he kiss Luke Rockhold after he knocked
straight
him
up.
out?
It's the kiss of death. He's like, I kill you, I kiss you.
Yeah, he says, "Love you, Rugal." Like, can you imagine getting knocked out and waking up to the guy like yelling at you that he loves you? I feel like nothing can emasculate you more.
Good Jesus. Well, with that, I think we pretty much went over many different scenarios. Obviously, there are more that could happen, but Israel Adesanya, Paulo Costa, everyone check it out. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Like I said, we'll be doing a live stream this weekend. Please tune in at 10 p.m. Eastern times when the main card starts. We'll likely do some of the prelims, so probably around 9 o'clock when the live stream starts. We're also on Twitter at TVEX_MMA. And what's your Twitter?
I'm Sesko MMA, just CESKO MMA. We can put it in the description.
Yeah, so follow us. We'll be live tweeting the fights. We'll tweet out a link to our live stream as well. So it's definitely a good place to just keep up to date with us. So yeah, until then, until this Saturday, I hope you guys have a good day, and we'll see you on Fight Night.
Yeah, bye everyone.